Today I will be sharing an interview with Thomas and Cambria Pratt, the wonderful creative team behind Shadowbinders, a webcomic that seamlessly merges fantasy and steampunk genres into an enjoyably original world. Before we begin the interview, I'd like to give a little background on the webcomic, which made its debut on August 27, 2010. In the beginning, we meet Mia, just a normal girl living an ordinary life until her grandmother gives her a box of her grandfather's belongings. Inside, Mia finds a journal with amazing drawings and a ring that sends her to an extraordinary world with flying pirate ships, astounding creatures, spectacular technology, and the flamboyantly magical Crimson Wren. Following the series has been an exciting journey, and in the last 4 years, not just the story, but the style and the color of the webcomic have transformed spectacularly. But enough of that, let's get on to the interview. How did you get started with webcomics? Tom introduced me to webcomics. I loved that we could tell a story and we weren't dependent on whether or not a publisher liked it before we could tell it. What was your inspiration for Shadowbinders? Visually, Shadowbinders is inspired by the video games Tom loves, like the Final Fantasy series. We also love anime, so there are strong influences both in story and art taken from our favorite shows. Since there are so many great aspects in both the fantasy genre and the steampunk genre, we decided to combine them and make a steam fantasy story. As for the story, Tom had an idea for a Shadowbinder comic back in the 1990s, and the story wouldn't come together in a way he liked, so he tabled it. Later, I had an idea for a story involving a girl from our world and a mage from another world. I wanted to use the title Shadowbinders and some of his original characters and designs. The two stories fit together, and that is how the Shadowbinders of today came to be. What is your process? Are you both writing and illustrating, or do you have separate responsibilities? It really is a pretty collaborative process. On the writing end, Cam and I discuss story ideas before she writes. Then she does a rough draft of a chapter. Sometimes I suggest a line or two of dialogue here or there or whatever, but she handles most of the actual scripting. On the art side of things, I draw the comic digitally in Manga Studio 5 on a 19-inch Unova tablet. Cam often helps me with the coloring and makes suggestions on the artwork. How has your knowledge of famous artworks influenced your creative process? It's funny, I have a degree in art education with a focus in art history, and I do the writing on the comic. I don't think we really look to the traditional famous pieces for our influences. I'm aware of them and I know them well, but I think Tom takes more of an influence from gaming and anime, or even Disney animation. Who is one of your favorite artists, and/or what is your favorite style of visual art? My favorite visual artist is Franz Marc. I love his use of color and composition. On the opposite end, I have always loved Thomas Cole and his amazing landscapes. I've always been a fan of fantasy illustrators like Brian Froud. What popular images do you see that are frequently repeated throughout your industry? Since the comic industry goes hand in hand with a lot of pop culture, you see a lot of the same imagery repeated. This has been going on for years. Some of the most famous examples of art reflecting popular culture would be with Andy Warhol and Roy Lichtenstein. Today, a lot of webcomics take famous shows and create comics as parodies, or they create fan stories from it. The comic industry as a whole is creating the companion books for pop culture hits, or they are creating the next big pop culture hits. What do you see as the role of visual arts in society today, particularly in your profession? I believe that the visual arts play a vital role in practically every aspect of our society, from the style of clothes we wear to the games we play. Visual artists create so much for our society. It is quite amazing when you sit back and think about it. How do the visual arts impact comics and webcomics? Since our industry is one that is based on visual art, I would say art is particularly important. Comics wouldn't exist without art of some kind. New communications and media technologies make imagery almost instantly available. Do you believe that this is having a positive or negative influence on your field or industry? I think it is having both positive and negative effects on the industry. On the positive side, anyone can put up their comic and instantly have readers and interaction. It's a great way to build up a platform. The negative is that with it being open to anyone, sometimes the quality of the work is not very good, and that can adversely affect a potential reader's opinion of the webcomic industry as a whole. Another negative is that since it's an instant and easy, the sheer number of comics and artists can be overwhelming. It is easy to become lost in the sea of webcomics.